Google Hangout, and I'm so ecstatic to have such a wonderful group of professionals to be with us this week on our Tuesday to talk about men's health and men's infertility or male's fertility. And I would take just a minute and introduce first a wonderful, amazing gentleman that has been a participant in the Making Dad Summit, and that's Mr. Bill, Dr. Bill Petok. So hi, Bill. Nice to have you with us.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
This week on our that was just the Google Hangout going live. I just want to tell everyone a little bit about you. And so Bill is a fellow of the Maryland Psychological Association, and he's a member, and he's a member of the American Psychological Association, and is a licensed psychologist, in the state of Maryland, and we're thrilled. I'm going to put my glasses on. We're thrilled to have you. And we also have wonderful Dr. Paul Shin, who has the afternoon off, and he's so gracious to be spending time with us. And right now, Dr. Paul Shin is working in Washington, D.C., and he is a urologist, and he has formal fellowship training in male infertility and microsurgery. So thank you so much for being here.
No problem. My pleasure. Greetings from Washington.
Yay! Is it pretty? Is it pretty there and warm still?
Yeah, it is. We're all bracing for the Pope's visit next week, so the traffic nightmares have already started, which is very typical for DC.
Oh, that's going to be an event. Traffic. Oh my goodness. We'll have to connect offline afterwards about how that went.
Right.
But this month's topic is something that, as you might know from the Making Dad Summit, I felt that there was such a need to have a constant conversation about men's health and men's reproductive health. And this month we came up with a topic about how to self-care or self-exam, and really to talk about cancer, male fertility or male prostate cancer. And September is the National Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. So I'm just so grateful that you've taken the time to be here and discuss this. What I found in my preparation for our time is that I'm still overwhelmed by the statistic, Dr. Shin, that testicular cancer is the most common cancer for young men from the age of 15 to 40. Right. That's staggering when I hear that.
Well, the other number to kind of put out there too, and especially in the fertility world, we deal with this a lot, is that up to 1% to 2% of men who even present for a fertility evaluation will eventually get diagnosed with testicular cancer. So there is something to the idea that if your testicles aren't working right, i.e. your sperm count's off or your testosterone level's too low, that that one of the potential causes is a pretty serious medical one, and it's something that I see almost every day in practice.
Well, that is so, I want to scream that at the mountaintop, because what I have been just focusing on is the fact that the differences between self-care with men and women, through the Making Dad Summit, all the education that I got was that men don't seek medical attention. There's a gap between, the pediatrician and then, young adolescent, that there's a big gap of really education and also intervention.
I'm sure Dr. Petok can echo this point, but if it's one thing that I've learned is that men in general are pretty knuckleheady when it comes to their own health, and that they're at a point in their life where yeah, not much is going wrong. They feel good, they have good energy level, they are athletic, and unfortunately that does tend to decline, and it's almost kind of a denial issue, where whether you're talking about fertility issues or just general health issues. That traditionally men just haven't thought that they've been part of the problem, and it's increasingly evident that that men have as big a stake in it as their partners do.
Sure, just to tag on that, not only do men have as big a stake, and close to 50% of infertility is in some way involving male factor, we don't have the same tradition, if you will, in terms of medical care after we're done with pediatric care. Women are fortunate, although some women might argue with me, that on a yearly basis, if you're typically seeing your gynecologist and you're having a pap smear, you're having some kind of reproductive health care on a regular basis. Men go to see the doctor when there's something wrong, and usually when it's something grossly wrong, we tend to think we'll be fine. And it's for all the reasons that Dr. Shin said. We're healthy, we're athletic, we eat well, we're afraid of doctors. You only go to a doctor if you're sick, as opposed to going to a doctor to maintain health. And that's a message that doesn't get through to men, in part because it's not delivered very well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So as sorry to interrupt, but as a mom of a 16-year-old boy, and being within the fertility world, I have been preaching to him about, using the analogy of monthly breast exams, and how it's okay and that it's a must that a man do self-exams. And within getting ready for this, there's a slogan that I was watching that said, "Be a man, self-exam." And so I'm so looking to your wisdom and your knowledge about how do we as moms, or how do we as sisters or wives or lovers, how do we encourage men to begin this practice?
You want to take that one, Paul?
Was that a bomb, you guys? I'm sorry.
I think no. One hand and a baseball bat in some
instances. I'm sorry.
But no, in all seriousness, I think one of the things that makes me very hopeful, actually, is that this generation of young men in their 20s and 30s, are actually, I think, of a truly different mindset in a way, in that, whether it is, the access to information through the internet or popular culture or social media, but, you are acutely more aware of your health issues, I think, as a young man growing up today than even, 20 years ago when I was in my 20s. And so one of the very hot topics within urology now is just this whole advent of men's health as a subject matter. It's being taken more seriously. The understanding is that we don't want to wait until you have that mid to late 40s guy who's overweight with high blood pressure and diabetes, that there needs to be some point of intervention before that. And so I think what you're going to see well within the scope of the next 10 to 20 years is that the frame shift, particularly of this generation of young men, stepping up to the plate and taking responsibility and seeking out care to make sure that their fertility numbers are okay, or that their health is good, is something that's much more in the popular consciousness, and I would attribute that probably more just to information dispersal than anything else.
I think you're absolutely right that there has been a change in the way information is delivered. There's way more information available on the internet. Some of it's good, some of it is mediocre, and some of it's frankly bad. So being discriminating is not the easiest thing. To respond to how does a mom do this, we have some information which suggests that men are more responsive to these messages from men. So it's tough to change once you're a mom. You can do it. I think you can deliver the message in a gentle way. As more and more men participate in delivering this information, more and more men will receive it in a better way. It's pretty clear that guys tend to listen well to their peers who talk about these things. And unfortunately, if you're a teenage boy, you're not talking about testicular cancer. You're not talking about fertility. The messages that have been delivered to you up to this point about sex have been don't. B, understand that if you do, you don't want to get somebody pregnant and you don't want to get a disease. Right. And so it's not about health. It's about disease. And changing the message coming from men is really important.
Well, I would love that, to have a brotherhood of guys talking about this, and I think learning how to do that. And I the only reason why I address it as a mom, because I'm a single mom, so it's
Yeah, of course.
just me talking about that. And the other statistic was staggering, that 8,000 young men are diagnosed each year in the United States with testicular cancer. And the earlier the detective, the better. 90. This 95%. Is survival rate. So I wonder if if it has to be something that is given upon birth. At the hospital, here's your baby, wonderful boy. This is something you need to know. But
I think that echoes back to what Dr. Petok was just explaining, is that the girls in our culture have much more exposure and interface with the medical system at a much earlier age than young boys do. And whether you go for an annual sports physical, that's certainly not nearly as invasive as, say, getting your first pap smear, or whatever. And so, it's kind of like almost like a reverse double standard in society, where men are just kind of reassured and told to be tough. But that message needs to start even in childhood with pediatrician counseling. And if those sort of patterns of learned behavior get set, then that's a lifetime of health that that kid can look forward to.
Right.
I think that's exactly right. You start earlier, you do it often, you make it normal. And that's what happens with women. It's normal. Mm-hmm. If you're normal, every month you're having a period, every month you're dealing with your reproductive health. If you're a guy, you start understanding about your own reproductive health in some shameful way when you understand that if you masturbate, it feels good, and so you don't talk about it. Nobody talks about what's normal, and it behooves all of us who are involved in men's health to talk about what's normal. And it would be normal to do a testicular self-exam. It would be normal to monitor your own health in the same way that if you're playing sports, once a year, you're going to have to see a doctor who's going to tell you to cough and turn to the right, and you're going to have to answer how many fingers he's holding up, which gives you you've passed your eye exam and your hearing exam.
Right.
We need to do a better job with that. There isn't any question about it. But normalizing it, I think, is really important.
I agree. And so if you fast forward to men in a situation of having, had the diagnosis of the couple of infertility, right? So that diagnosis is, unprotected sex for a year and not being able to achieve pregnancy, and then you come into this whole arena of fertility treatments, I think that also has to be mainstream too, that the gentleman, when this is identified as an issue, they need to also be seen. They need to create a baseline. And, fortunately for men, that baseline is a little less invasive than, for women.
A whole lot.
So I see it within, my workshops and my coaching, that it really is like a light bulb that goes out for some men, because it's not in their awareness that it could be a male issue. And of course, you're entering into this new, this new world of fertility. But maybe you can speak to that about, when a man enters this fertility of trying to create your family, and the holistic approach about how there is correlation between a man's overall health and his fertility. You mentioned that before, Dr. Shin.
Well, I think that one of the important things that men need to take stock of is that when they do begin their interaction with the medical system as regards infertility, is that they should never feel as though they're being cast off. Okay. Unfortunately, technology has certainly progressed to the point, and I've heard on more than one occasion where guys have come in and they've been told, well, you just have a little bit of sperm. There's nothing that we need to do for you. We can go straight to doing IVF. Okay, and that's like saying, okay, well, certainly that's one of the available options, right? But because there's a laundry list of things that could potentially be significantly the cause of, and potentially treatable, medically speaking, it's most important that whatever fertility environment they're in, it needs to be collaborative, right? Because if you really have the couple's best interest at heart, yes, sometimes the answer to that is to do a more aggressive treatment, right? But in general, if you address male factor fertility issues, even though it sometimes takes a little while longer for changes to manifest themselves, male factor treatment tends to be more cost effective, it tends to be covered by insurance, and it tends to actually, you know, sit okay with the couple if they have a reasonable shot at conceiving naturally. And you have to kind of be smart about that and collaborate with your infertility colleagues on the female side that way, you know, to let them know that, yeah, you can't approach every situation by throwing money at it and doing IVF, because you could be overlooking something.
And I want to echo what Dr. Shin has said, that we know that, frankly, it's probably more cost-effective to do male factor treatment first and to evaluate that in a reasonable sort of way, which reduces stress on the couple. And we know that when you increase stress, you don't do anybody a favor in terms of health, no matter what kind of health issues we're dealing with. Right. So a collaborative effort between health professionals who are dealing with reproductive care becomes critical. And frankly, on the urology side, we're operating at a deficit. There are far more reproductive endocrinologists practicing in the United States than there are urologists with specialized training. And the specialized training becomes really important. I had a case last week referred to me by a colleague of Dr. Shin's who was diagnosed with having some low testosterone, so he got some implants, and gee, it had the reverse impact. The message to his testes was, oh, you got plenty of testosterone on board. You don't need to make sperm anymore.
I see that 4 times a week.
Yeah. That low T, you know, that is so important. That's one of the other tweetable thing that we need to get out there is the testosterone issues. Just that is so profoundly heard across the board about the knowledge about that.
And it goes back to the men's health issue in general, which is, you know, if you want to get stronger, you can lift weights, or you can lift weights and take anabolic steroids. And if you take anabolic steroids and lift weights, you may get stronger, but you're going to have all kinds of other side effects. One of them being potential sterility.
And it's not, and you can correct me, Dr. Shin, but you can't reverse it.
It actually, for the most part, men do rebound. The real asterisk there is that, yeah, there is a possibility you could completely burn everything out. But the other thing that oftentimes throws couples for a loop is that, you know, one of the sort of things that hamstrings us when we are treating men is that let's say we have an intervention, whether it is to supplement hormones or to repair a varicose vein or to remove a testicular tumor. One of the issues is that treating male fertility and trying to manifest a change in the semen analysis, better numbers, better motility, is like turning a battleship around. It's a 3 to 6 months, sometimes a year-long process, you know? And so when you've got that couple where the guy, and this is a very prototypical situation where the guy is not even a serious athlete, like a weekend warrior, you know, taking steroids with a 0 sperm count with a 39-year-old wife. Well, unfortunately, you're on the clock. You know, you have no choice but to wait 6 months and see if you rebound, because there's nothing else to do.
Right. And then you bring in the emotional component of that, the emotional hit, and that was my personal experience when you know, you find out your partner, you know, the mobility, the count, everything isn't right, and then you really need to put a time out and make sure emotionally to have that resilience to move forward, that there's a time for healing, because it's my experience is that when a male receives that information, the emotional component mirrors what a woman feels, but it's just the way that it is expressed and shared that is different. You know, the sadness, the heartbreak, the not being able to be there for your partner the way that you had envisioned, you know, the loss of the dream. So, you know, I think that's the big reason why I'm here today, and so grateful that you donated your time and that we're all talking about this, because the emotional component, a man is a man, and we need to teach also self-care and self-love around this. But Dr. Petok, I'm sure you've seen this within your practice also.
Oh, sure. We see this all the time where a guy, well, I think of any number of cases where a guy got the message fairly early on that there was some problem with his semen, a guy with Klinefelters or something like that, where he had no one to talk to in a reasonable sort of way because it was too embarrassing for him to talk about it.
Right.
And it took him 2 or 3, talk about turning the battleship around. I like Dr. Shin's analogy. We can turn around the medical stuff, 6 months, but turning around the psychological stuff, this guy waited 5 years to talk to somebody, and by then he's 41, 42, and his wife is 43. Now we're talking about donor gametes on both sides of the fence, and the loss issues were great. Part of the problem is we don't talk about these things earlier on, and we wait till there's a problem. So it goes back to the original concept here, which is self-care and being proactive about your own health, whether it's your cardiovascular health or your reproductive health. Being proactive about it is important, and with greater information available, with greater opportunities for programs like this where somebody can tune in and hear a couple of educated professionals who have an idea about what's going on here and aren't frankly afraid to talk about it, you get a better opportunity, I think. And the younger cohort, those people in their 20s and teens who are availing themselves of information like this, or parents who are saying, hey, listen, I saw this really interesting thing, I think you ought to take a look at this, or let's look at it together and we can talk about it, because it's important.
Well, do you think it's fair to say then the fertility, I'm going to date myself about how old I am, but 20 years ago, my son's turning 17 next Monday, but 20 years ago it wasn't an industry, and the shame that I felt, the shame that the diagnosis of fertility or infertility back then, and I feel that it is such a different culture now, even within the women that I'm speaking with, that there's still the sadness, but not necessarily so much the stigma or the shame of it, because of it's out of the closet, because we're talking about it. And I feel like, going back to the battleship, it's going to take us a little bit, I think, to address that with men, that this is, just what we said at the beginning, this is a common issue, and for the male factor. And how do we, as a culture, start taking away the shame of that, the wake, the wake of getting.
Well, I think a number of things have happened with women in particular, and that there have been a number of women of prominence who have come forward and talked about their own fertility issues. So Celine Dion comes to mind. Right. There's Joan London comes to mind. There are a number of others. To date, there hasn't been a prominent man who has talked about it. The closest was last year when Jimmy Fallon talked about infertility in his family, and talked about, it turns out it was his wife. I remember being initially thrilled that, gee, here's a guy who's going to talk about it. It's going to be male factor, and no, it turns out it's not. Right. So I think that's one way that things begin to turn around. I think as organizations like Path2Parenthood recognize male factor infertility as a significant problem and start doing awareness issues, we kid it around about nerds talking about male issues, which Dr. Shin has been a part of. As these things become more available, it makes it more possible for men to have greater awareness, and there needs to be more communal, if you will, awareness. It's not just half a dozen folks getting together and talking about this. It's much greater. Some people of prominence need to step forward, I think.
I mean, the other issue too is that there are definitely more practitioners who make it a priority to deal with these sorts of issues as well. I mean, in most major metropolitan areas in the U.S., you're going to find one, if not two or three urologists who have specialty training in male fertility issues, who have an interest in sexual medicine. And it's breaking down some of those taboos that, hey, that it's okay to go to the doctor to talk about these things, because they're not only important for self-esteem, but they're also important for relationships. And Kristen, you and I were talking a little bit about this earlier, but I think one of the most important things when you counsel a young couple that's going through a fertility, or and Bill can attest to this too, a very common cause of infertility is actually sexual dysfunction. Where men have real issues maintaining erections under pressure, where men have issues ejaculating and achieving orgasm with the pressure of pregnancy. So addressing these types of issues in a very open and honest and straightforward way, not only benefits the man's ego in terms of being able to help him with some of these things, but also the couple, and that stretches well beyond after the child is born.
I think that's exactly right, Dr. Shin. It's a matter of reducing shame, reducing stigma, normalizing things, talking about it earlier on, making it normal to deal with these kinds of issues. Again, it's going back to having a potential for thinking about health in a positive sort of way. That these are normal issues that normal couples deal with. The incidence of infertility is significant in this country, and if you go into any classroom in a middle or elementary school, it is not unlikely that there is one child in a class of 30 that was born as the result of reproductive technology. Sure. And so that's different than 30 years ago, where there was maybe one in a school district. So we're it's now part of our fabric, our cultural fabric.
Right. Well, I would love.
One other thing I wanted to add. I wanted to echo something Dr. Shin said, and that is, in large metropolitan areas, there are 1, 2, or 3, maybe 4 or 5 in some areas, well-trained urologists who specialize in male factor infertility and sexuality issues. We have a problem with access to care in other areas where there are not those kinds of people available. So what you wind up is programs like this, which are available to everywhere. You get people aware of the need to go to a center where there is specialty training, so that you get someone who really does know what they're talking about and understands male factor infertility, the sexual issues involved with it, and is able to put together a package of treatment so guys get good care.
Perfect. Great. Thank you for that. So we're coming up to our half an hour mark, and I was just wanting to have you both take a moment and maybe give us the pearl of wisdom, the one tidbit. If you're a man listening to this, or if you're a woman who is in a relationship with a man who, they're just starting out or in the middle, what would you recommend as the pearl as we close out our little half an hour chat?
I mean, for me, I think the main message to pass on to men is just simply want to be a participant. Don't be a bystander. Step up and take some responsibility. Get your numbers tested, get evaluated, and participate in this whole process with your partner. It's going to make you feel better. It's going to make your partner feel better. And more importantly, the sooner that you figure out that there's a problem, it's the sooner that you get on the path to the solution. And that's one of the other overarching messages, is that in spite of all of the bad stuff that we've been talking about, whether it's testicular cancer or now in the case of some of our older men, prostate cancer, that there is a whole litany of treatments that we can offer that usually are effective. It's just a matter of even figuring out the problem to begin with. So my take-home message would be is be a participant.
And I think that's an excellent pearl, because if you're not a participant, you're allowing somebody else to take charge of your situation. And if you're relying on somebody else, you're not relying on yourself. The other thing that echoes what Dr. Shin said is that this is a team sport. And if you're going to have a family, it's going to require both of you to participate, and you want to be equal in this. So take charge of your own side of it.
Thank you so much. And what I love is Hangout. It'll be forever up on the web, and we'll be able to post and talk more about that. So thank you so much. And if you are watching this live and have further questions or want more information, feel free to email me. Or why don't Dr. Shin be able to give contact information also? Dr. Petok, did you do that too?
I'm sorry, you were breaking up.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know what feedback. I was just hoping for you to give some contact information.
Go ahead, Dr. Shin.
Oh, sure. So you can find me at our practice's website, which is shadygrowfertility.com.
And you can find me at drpetok.com. That's drpetok.com.
Thank you so much. I appreciate them, and I appreciate all the insights. And we'll be sharing some more. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having us.
That's absolutely a lot of fun. Thank you.